Good morning, Ayubawan, and welcome to the session. To set the background a little bit, the blue economy is not just an economic frontier, but it is a lifeline for coastal communities and a pathway to sustainable development. And for SIDS like Sri Lanka, Seychelles, Mauritius, and big nations like India, the blue economy holds immense potential, but also complex challenges. Today, we have an esteemed panel of experts who bring diverse perspectives to discuss not this, but much more. As mentioned, we only have 45 minutes, so let's dive right in. For now, let me set the context, and let me come to you, Harsha. We are in Sri Lanka. We're being hosted in this beautiful country. So, api Lankave teka parangamu. What are the key opportunities and challenges for Sri Lanka to leverage its blue economy to contribute to food security, economic growth, and employment generation?
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Good day to everyone. So the Vogue magazine in January said Sri Lanka's south coast is this winter's hottest destination. So I'll start from there because, our unique strategic position, right, offers multiple opportunities for us. Economics, like you said, right? So I start with the coastal tourism. It's a huge driver. You see, places like Arugambe, Ahangama, people come to kite surf, to watch whales, or you go to Mirissa or Kalpitia, hundreds of pods of dolphins. This is an amazing place, right? And we have so much of coastal tourism activity. And what that means is hotels, restaurants, villas, bars, you name it, right? And so this is an entire ecosystem that, that depends on coastal tourism. So that's one. And then other is obviously fishing. Millions of people's livelihoods are dependent upon fishing. And then, of course, the deep water ports that we have. I'm sure you perhaps spoke about all this, and I don't want to get into great detail. But, being 50 nautical miles away from one of the busiest sea routes, and I met, as I was walking in here, people who run these ports and terminals who know much more than I do. It offers us huge potential if we utilize them properly in port operations and maritime services and all of that. And I'm told like 60,000 ships pass by the island. So just imagine, what potential that exists. So then the question, the second part of your question is challenges, right? Now, we had a massive oil spill. Actually, a ship caught fire called Express Pearl. And fishermen's livelihoods lost. Marine ecosystem was, shot. And I don't think justice was done. We originally said it cost something like $40 million or something to clean it up. We got $8 million, if I'm not mistaken, and that was not enough to scratch the surface. And, experts said the loss was something like $6.4 billion, right? So when oil spills, hazardous waste gets, released, that not only destroys the environment, the fish and all of that, but destroys the livelihoods of fishermen and others. So what kind of legal and regulatory frameworks do we have, and how successful have we been in sort of addressing these issues along those lines? So that's one. Then we have on fishing itself and other marine resources, infrastructure gaps. We don't have the right kind of technology. We don't have these multi-day fishing trawlers. We don't have cold storage. We don't have electronic, what do you call, fish location devices, IUU is an issue, all those things. And another challenge is how we sort of make sure that our policies are consistent with leveraging what I started out by saying is a unique sort of geostrategic location, right? So then you have to start thinking beyond the shores of Sri Lanka, beyond the 200 miles of IE, right? So that's where I think Sri Lanka needs to start thinking big, right? We need to punch way above our weight class. Yes, we are a small island, but then our influence in this region and beyond can be a hell of a lot more than what it is now. And I see distinguished people here, former commanders of the Sri Lanka Navy, people who run ports, people who run major operations that are related to maritime services. So, as a nation, we have this potential, we have the opportunities, and we have the challenges. Then is how to have a policy to leverage on this. So, I'll stop at that.
Thank you very much, Harsha. You've raised a lot of similarities between other SIDS as well, especially in relation to your references to tourism and fishing, but also the oil spill that was experienced in Mauritius. So I will now move to the Mauritian context. Tina, it gives me great pleasure to have another Creole speaker on the panel. This is rare, so bonjour, bienvenue. Drawing from the Mauritian experience, also an island that is punching above its weight. How can island nations such as yours effectively integrate traditional marine practices with modern technologies that help to drive the growth of your blue economy?
Hello, good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the ORF for organizing this amazing forum and for having me here. It is such a huge honor. So, yes, nice to have so many islands together. So, Mauritius, Seychelles, and I just heard Excellency speaking about Sri Lanka, and even in the first session, I would like, first of all, to draw some similarities. So Mauritius is a small island in the Indian Ocean, and also very strategically located in the western, I would say, part of the Indian Ocean. And just like in the former session, they say that it is majority 52% of women. Same for Mauritius, 52% women. And we are also faced with more or less the same threats and opportunities like Seychelles, Maldives, and Sri Lanka. So I would like to start with the first few drivers of our economy and how we actually served on it. And I would like to touch a little bit on Wakashu if I have a little time. So actually, we have been now surfing on the blue economy because one of the main pillars for our GDP for Mauritius is tourism. And nowadays, we speak about sustainable tourism. And Mauritius has been constantly engaging in what we call developing, devising, and progressing on the sustainable blue development strategy to leverage on our island's ocean resources. I would like here to also commend Seychelles' development of the blue bonds, which was first, and then Mauritius afterwards started on the bonds, green bonds, blue bonds, and also it is a lot of question of, sensitizing, educating the population. And I would like here to commend the youths of the country for starting with this notion that, yes, our ocean is our primary source, and being really engaged in the conservation and being very, very proactive, even advocating to government and setting up a lot of NGOs. Today, we can see so much going on in terms of coastal preservation, reef resilience, etc. So I have to say, a lot of measures to encourage, for instance, fishing, coastal tourism, and aquaculture in Mauritius. From the last budget measures itself, a few of them. For instance, have been to increase what you call the bad weather allowance for fishermen, which is today up to 800 Mauritian rupees, which in the past was not even half of that, and also increasing grants for fishermen so that they can update, increase, buy new gears such as hooks and fishing materials by up to 3,500 Mauritian rupees, and also installation of solar-powered lights at jetties to ensure the fishermen safety, also ensuring that the fisheries posts and jetties are being repaired and upgraded, and acquisitions for semi-industrial fishermen boats for cooperatives, which are given up to 6 million Mauritian rupees. I would also like to say one of the last key measures that we brought about was that to try to reduce what you call the gap between blue-collar, white-collar jobs, etc. So now fishermen are being given training. The whole community of fishermen with their families are being given a lot of facilities. Also, one key measure has been the introduction of duty-free facility measures for acquisition of 4x4 vehicles, which fishermen can be entitled to. Moreover, they can be entitled to a grant of 50,000 rupees for renewal of a motor outboard motors. And like that, there are many, many measures, but I think this has been key in encouraging what we call our fishermen community, and also trying to encourage even the youngsters of a family to try to engage into support the families as well. Moreover, we have been trying to, apart from modernizing infrastructure, we have been trying to encourage research and innovation using ICT. Mauritius is also the first small island developing state in the region to develop what you call the nano satellite and to launch it. And we are constantly doing research right now. And one of the key things about Mauritius is that we have a large EEZ and we're very rich in tuna. But it also adds one of the biggest challenges, which is illegal fishing and lack of monitoring. Because given the lack, I would say, lack of innovative measures and support in the past, we are still striving to find means for efficient monitoring and control. And here I would also like to take on, just like Sri Lanka had a major oil spill. So we had an oil spill in the country, which was in my constituency, actually, when I was the MP in this constituency, which was called the Wakashu spill. So it became famous across on BBC, CNN, etc. And Mauritius was not prepared for it because we did not have any oil contingency plan. It became a shock. So for this whole coastal region, the southeast coast of Mauritius, for which myself, I was an MP, when I went there, I was shocked. Because our gem, our treasure, which was the ocean, the beautiful blue sea, and the sandy beaches were all covered in dark oil. And the fishermen were in complete stress, the families, and not just in stress of thinking about livelihoods and seeing the landscape, but also health-wise, because it became even difficult to breathe, and people were having lungs issues. The World Health Organization had to send health experts, to help the people and to actually coach how to do things and how to breathe and how to get away, etc. But the thing is, when we faced this as a small island developing stage, which did not have an oil contingency spills plan, we have to be super grateful here for regional and international cooperation. So I have to say that countries from across the Indian Ocean, be it Seychelles, Maldives, be it international countries like India, like Europe, like Japan, like China, even the US, which sent us experts, not just marine experts to help us with the oil spill, but also experts to help with rebuilding the way of living around the coastal region. And Yes, we needed expert divers as well, which came from different countries, and we needed financing. And the EU and the United Union, they sent representatives flying specially to Mauritius during that short period of time to help us. And for this, we are super grateful. Today, like 2.5 years after the Wakashi spill, if you go, well, I invite all of you to go to Mauritius. If you go to Mauritius and go through that part of the island, you would be amazed at the beauty of the coast. And not just that, because we have been investing massively in rebuilding the whole coastal, I would say, coastal reef, and even investing in what you call the jetties. It's called, there's a technical term which I can't remember for it, but where to prevent coastal erosion, there is a lot of mechanisms being put into place. And yeah, so if you go today, it's beautiful, and it's all thanks to cooperation, especially international cooperation. And this is where I think this forum today is key, because if we have to enhance for instance, our loopholes, or try to see how we can collaborate to make our own countries better in terms of forging ahead in a resilient and sustainable blue economy future, I think this is what we are here for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. And I will second her invitation. You should visit Mauritius and Seychelles if you ever get the chance. Fantastic initiatives coming out of Mauritius as well. And I would like to unpack a little bit about community and women in another set of questions with you. But for now, Harsha has advised us to think big. So Linda, I'm going to move to you for the next question. Paint us the big picture. Our two speakers have outlined the challenges that they face in small island states, and your background in strategy and policy perhaps places you in a perfect position for my next question. So strategic planning in the blue economy requires a very delicate balance between national interests as well as regional and global cooperation. Now, in your experience, what challenges have arisen when trying to align these priorities, and how can they be addressed? And if I may also throw you a curveball, where does AI fall in all of this?
Thank you, moderator. And I'll also like to join my previous speakers to echo my thanks to the Observer Research Foundation for having me here, and also to be part of this panelist of great minds. And to respond to your question, first of all, I speak as a representative of the African Union Commission, which covers a broad mandate of the African continent. And as an intergovernmental organization, our main role is coordination, policy alignment, and identification of priorities, especially when it comes to the blue economy. And at the African perspective, we recognize every member state, all our 55 member states, as having a blue economy framework. And what this means is we don't only cover countries that are oceanic, we cover freshwater, we cover inland waters, we cover the lakes as well. So all our 55 member states are considered to be blue friendly when it comes to the African Commission perspective. And some of the challenges we've identified from a continental perspective is fragmentation of policies. We're hearing the challenges from Mauritius, from Seychelles, and at Africa, we have 6 small island developing states. Common challenges also is extended when it comes to Cape Verde. We also hear the same thing in Cape Verde, in South Tome and Principe, and so on. And we see the fragmentation of policies across our member states. And what we do to address this is to advocate that all African member states implement the Africa Blue Economy Strategy, which was developed in 2019. And so far, we've also gone down to streamline it to the national level. So far, we've ensured that 38 of our African member states have their own national policies. Most recently, we've also developed frameworks that support this implementation. we don't only ensure that member states have the policy or the frameworks, we also ensure that they have implementation plan and are supported to implement these national strategies. And another challenge we have is insufficient capacity. Across the continent, blue economy is an emerging sector. Otherwise, before now, it was there as fishing, which is a very traditional sector. But when it comes to a holistic approach of blue economy, it's an emerging platform, it's an emerging name on the continent. So what we've noticed is that there's been insufficient capacity across the continent, and to address this, we have centers of excellences on fisheries, aquaculture, and blue economy spread across different countries. I think Seychelles has one, South Africa, and a couple of others. And this is to ensure that we bring youths in the perspective when it comes to blue economy. There's knowledge transfer from the older generation to the new generation. Because if we had to talk about blue economy, we have to ensure that we all understand what exactly is blue economy. And so there needs to be that bridge of skills and knowledge transfer. We've also noticed that there's been a lot of financial disparities across member states. And we make reference to Seychelles as champions of blue economy, and specifically to their financial blue bond, which is a first. We also are encouraging member states to adopt the same principle. And when it comes to knowledge sharing, Seychelles has been very good on that. They've advocated for all member states in Africa to key into the blue bond. And so for this, we are very grateful for that, not just as our champions, but also advocating for financing mechanisms that is innovating. We also lastly experienced that these different priorities, how can we bring them together? So we categorize priorities, but also identify that every member state is sovereign and needs to be respected. So what we do, we group different priorities. For the small islands, their priorities are mostly the same: tourism, fishing. We see how to develop bankable projects for priorities that are aligned. When it comes to the big states, we also see how to cross-fertilize learning of exchange, sharing of experiences, and to ensure that the projects we develop are impacted to the people and to the nationals itself. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Linda. You raised some pertinent challenges, insufficient capacity, knowledge transfer, financing especially. And yes, Seychelles, as a response to that financing crunch, launched the world's first blue bond back in 2015. It was valued at about $15 million. Now, Dr. Ghosh, yesterday's roundtable revealed a very sorry state of affairs when it comes to climate financing. And you've written a lot about this extensively. And something you said was that we need more innovative blue financial products. So perhaps the most interesting and most complex question comes to you, sir. What new financing instruments and avenues might be leveraged for developing the blue economy beyond what we have done already?
Practically, I see three avenues here. One, of course, we have already talked about one critical element, that is the blue bond. Now, if we look at the entire portfolio of blue financing, what we find is that it's largely dominated by public finance, and private finance is conspicuous by its absence. So how do we bring that in? One critical element can be philanthropy. So if I really look at how much money of philanthropy is really getting into the blue economy, it's practically nominal. Now, if I look at the global private wealth today as it stands, as per the 2023 estimates, it is $454 trillion US. Can't I mobilize 1% of that for bridging the extensive SDG financing gap, of which maybe 1% can get into financing the blue economy financing gap? 1% of $454 trillion US, which is slated to rise to $627 trillion US by 2027, makes it $4.5 trillion annually, or up to $6.3 trillion annually by 2027. So think of this. Now, how how do we essentially create a case? That is philanthropy. Of course, they are not really looking at any kind of ROI or return on investment or an economic rate of return. Now, create the case for the blue for the private finance. How do we do that? There is no clear ROI when it comes to spending in the blue economy. There's no perceptible economic rate of return, but there is a perceptible social rate of return. So how do I essentially communicate that to the investors? Now, it is in this context that what we often miss out in the context of financing the blue economy is what is the value of the blue economy. If I really want to put in money in a particular initiative, what is the buck that I'm getting what is the money that I'm getting for every buck that I'm investing in? Now, in fact, when we talk about any kind of estimate of the blue economy, people usually put across estimates like $1.5 trillion or $3.5 trillion. Well, that is barely tip of the iceberg that we are talking about. Essentially, if you get into a more comprehensive estimate of the value that the blue economy is yielding for the human community, you might find that it's equivalent to the global GDP or more than that. Because when we talk about the values of the ecosystem services, in fact, there have been extreme conversations on that. At one point in time, that this exceeded 3 times the world's GDP. Now, in fact, there is a huge latent value in the blue economy which we have not realized. That is, of course, in the form of the blue carbon itself. Where is the value of the blue carbon? And what is the value of the blue carbon? Where is the estimate? If there is an estimate and if we create a market out of that, then think of the value that it's going to yield. Now, secondly, there is another issue when we talk about pricing or valuation of this carbon. We often look at the value of the carbon from the perspective of the value or the price that the market itself, the carbon market itself is realizing or discovering. That is through the process of negotiations that keeps on happening. Now, on the other side, what we do not realize is that the market is inefficient, adequately inefficient to discover the real value of carbon sequestration. And that gets reflected through another mechanism called the SCC, the social cost of carbon, which in fact for an economy like India stands today at around $84 or $88 per ton. I mean, look at any of the VER prices, which will be in the range of 30s, say $30, $32 in that range. So this again creates a huge mechanism of coming up with a valuation and eventually creating a huge financial pool for the blue economy as a whole. Now, in fact, there are examples of even what we talk about, that is debt for nature swaps. But even in the context of debt for nature swaps, we keep on confining our entire discourse to the carbon market. That is because there is an existing market. We are not getting into creating markets for other blue products which are imperceptible in nature. Largely imperceptible in nature. What about the extensive supporting service that the blue economy provides the human community with? Can we create a market for the other various forms of regulating services that the blue economy is providing us with? So if we look at, suppose I want to create an embankment maybe, or suppose say blue infrastructure through mangroves, and I want to invest in mangrove restoration. So what is the return out there? If I estimate the kind of storm protection service that the mangrove provides me with, that is the social rate of return. So when we talk about conceptualizing these products, the first and foremost thing is that we have to get into a more fundamental mechanism, that is valuation, that this entire initiative, this entire investment is going to bring into my system. So let me stop here. We can continue with this engagement later.
Okay, Dr. Ghosh, that was fantastic in terms of talking about blue carbon, which is very overlooked by some small island states as well. We have about 15 minutes left. I hope the audience is as enraptured as I am with this discussion. So I will come back to you, Linda. You said we know that there's no universal definition of blue economy. And one of the previous speakers also said that very few people in the community will know what an SDG is. Even fewer, I bet, will know what blue economy is, right? So the lack of a definition has allowed many countries to implement or to have leeway with respect to the implementation of their policy frameworks in this space. In your opinion, can you share some diplomatic and policy mechanisms that have proven most effective in ensuring, as Dr. Ghosh has mentioned, that blue economy initiatives are both economically viable as well as environmentally and socially responsible?
Okay, thank you. Like you mentioned, if I'm to recall us back a little, and when I said that the blue economy is an emerging field, and different countries have defined blue economy differently. So the very first thing when it comes to the African Union, we've set the pace in actually defining what our blue economy is. And I said we define the blue economy as ensuring that all oceans, fresh waters, landlocked, everything, so far as you have something, you are considered to be blue friendly or a blue country friendly. That's the first thing when it comes to the definition. So at the African level, the Commission has set the pace for that. And moving broadly into policy, I'd like to recall what our previous panelist mentioned when she said that different frameworks or something that is non-binding. But I like to kind of concur with her because as much as you develop frameworks, which is our area, we have so many policies and development of frameworks, but how do you get countries to implement something that is non-binding? It's also a thought for her, right? It could be very challenging, and we've noted this. We came up with a blue economy reference group that was supposed to speak to that. It was non-binding, but we also noted that so many countries were not obliged to because it's a non-binding instrument. How do you hold them accountable to that? And on the policy front as well, we promote multilateralism. Forums like this, the Innovation Island Summits, it will be good to replicate it across other global souths. We could try Africa next time, probably, and ensure that in this kind of forums, the message is passed across, and we don't just sit in a room and design something that is not implementable to people on ground. And then we also need to engage with the community when it comes to indigenous knowledge. We have so much knowledge on the grassroots. Are we ensuring that the policy that we develop or the framework that we develop is touching those on the ground? Is it directly speaking to people on the ground? So this is why indigenous knowledge should be promoted. We advocate for the promotion of indigenous knowledge. It's our science, it's our own birthright. So we have to ensure that that indigenous space is not forgotten. I know in Mauritius there is an indigenous group, but I don't know how far the country has gone in promoting and bringing them to the limelight, ensuring that there's a synergy between policy, science, and vice versa as well. And we also advocate for cooperation across the global south, especially. And while the West has been proven to be very good in advocating for financing, but across ourselves, across the global south, how can we share knowledge among ourselves? We have to move as a force to reckon with. And forums like this, like I mentioned, the G20 and all of that. Thank you.
Okay, Tina, I will come to you in a minute. I do want to pick on what Linda has just mentioned with respect to communities. But Dr. Ghosh, very quickly, you've also said that the full potential of the blue economy is a long way off. How far have governments and businesses come to potentially getting a little closer to that end line in striking a balance between expanding blue economy sectors, perhaps traditional and non-traditional, while also ensuring that the long-term health of marine ecosystems are kept in check?
Of course, first of all, there shouldn't be a trade-off between the two. Both can be achieved and both should be achieved. A, the role of regulation. B, the right kind of incentive structure in the institutional mechanism. Now, in fact, I know in many states in India, they have created this regulation that you simply cannot do fishing for a very specific species in the Bay of Bengal, that is the hilsha, in specific seasons. So now that is essentially helping the cause of the species as such, helping the fishermen community, and in the process also augmenting the ecosystem health. So the very notion that there is a trade-off between conservation and development goals is a bit too traditional and a bit too reductionist as well from that perspective. So there are ways by way of which we can promote sustainability, can promote, in fact, community level development as well.
Let me come to you, Tina, for community and development. I believe you were named top 100 under 40 at some point in time, and you also pledged at that point to support the SDGs 4 and 5, specifically quality education and gender equality. Now, in your opinion, what role does education, indigenous knowledge, and local community engagement play in ensuring that BE jobs are accessible and beneficial to coastal populations? Your views.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. First of all, when we talk about education, so education, I believe, does not start from school. It starts at home. So it's not just formal education. So if we talk about, just like our former speaker also talked about SDGs, and as we say, the vulgarization of what are SDGs, what is sustainability, what is the blue economy, what are the threats that face us, and how do we ensure that we actually even exist. For instance, for small island developing state, we are so vulnerable to climate change and the impacts that, for instance, if there is a huge flooding, Seychelles and Mauritius could disappear if we don't know how to be resilient. So first of all, the concept of blue economy and how to preserve itself for, our environment has to start at home, as I said. And the good thing is that in Mauritius, it has started. So you would see actually kids telling the elders and the parents, for instance, to buy biodegradable things or not to throw litter on the street, and they teach by example. And that's I believe, what proper education is about. So if we talk about women and the local communities, once again, I'd like to go back to Wakasho because it showed me something which I would never forget. When this oil spill happened and we didn't quite know how to go about it, one thing which was the beauty of a crisis moment is to see everyone come together, as we say, as one nation, to put hands together to try to help. Many people, educated or not, different communities, indigenous groups, youth, women, fishers, professionals, were coming to say, how can I help? What can we do? Trying to think of ways, for instance, to build what you would call, would be like big balloons to try to absorb the oil at that time. And from morning to night, people were together to try to see how to get done with this crisis. And the beauty of that is that we could see the engagement of the local community, youth, children, women. And I would like here to say that this is very crucial. For instance, if we talk about formal education, it's important that in our curricula, school curricula, be it secondary level or tertiary level, like for Mauritius, that these words, these concepts be already taught to the kids, to the children, and irrespective of gender, whether someone is a boy or a girl, anyone can become, as we say for today, a gender activist. Like you and me, like from Seychelles and Mauritius, we are actually activists on climate change for our country, especially for championing the cause for SIDS. And if we talk about climate change financing, just like our speaker from the African Union mentioned, we have been constantly trying to ask that this pledge be respected, that the developing states stayed from the Paris 2020 agreement. I mean, until today, we're still waiting. So it's not just about talking, it's about action. So I believe education, commitment is key, and also delivering on said promises. So putting words into action. So I know my time is up, but there's so much to talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina. And you raised a very interesting point on engagement and action. So Harsha, I will come to you to wrap up on the Sri Lankan context for us. Sri Lanka has come a long way from the economic crisis, from COVID, and I believe engagement and collaboration has played a great role. So in your view, given the global nature of ocean resources, what lessons can Sri Lanka still learn from its international collaborations in the blue economy development?
Thanks. Let me sort of pick up from where I left off and what the other panelists also said. It's about international collaborations in protecting maritime resources on the one hand and livelihoods on the other. And I want to talk about legal responsibilities. And, you brought up a very interesting point of whether they are binding collaborations, and how are you going to enforce these things? Now, I'm going to take two examples. I was in government 2015 to 19 when we had to face a huge problem because the European Union had banned fisheries exports from Sri Lanka, at least $250 million revenue at the time. Why? Because of IUU regulation violations. These vessels didn't have monitoring systems or whatever. And we had been warned multiple times, but the government at the time had basically neglected to fix it. And it was a challenge, but we were able to, fix it in 2016 and to remove the ban on fisheries exports to the EU under GSP+. So there was a binding agreement that you don't do this, and then this is what happens. Now, another story is bottom trawling that we have been discussing with the government of India for a long period of time, which we have not seen any resolution. It's been discussed at every meeting, and that's a big issue. Economics issue, but there is no agreement. Nobody's really bound by any regulation or any legal agreement, and this continues to go on, right? So how do you sort of internationally collaborate, and in this case between Sri Lanka and India? Then the other issue is international collaborations on piracy and hijacking. I was once again involved in what was written about called WhatsApp diplomacy. At the time I was in the foreign ministry, interestingly, when I wrote it down, a ship, oil tanker by the name of Aries was hijacked by pirates from Puntland. And we didn't even know there was a country called Puntland. It was a autonomous territory, semi-autonomous territory of Somalia. And, the Minister of Foreign Affairs was not available. I was acting, and we had a huge issue. And these pirates had sort of surrounded this ship, and they were shooting at it and so on. So we internationally collaborated. The United States State Department intervened in that case and got us in contact with the Chief of Staff of the Puntland President. And we were able to resolve the matter without getting any of our crew killed. But then, you got to look at it more broadly, for strategic security partnerships, particularly in the Indian Ocean, where there are less binding agreements among the nations, literal and otherwise, right? So freedom of navigation in the Indian Ocean, what kind of rules, right, are we following? So those are the things. And anti-smuggling, I think I'm running out of time, right? So there are many more that I want to talk about, but one I have to touch upon is renewable energy, offshore wind resources. How do we collaborate with nations, particularly in this region, to leverage what is available? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harsha. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the session. May I have a round of applause for my panelists, all of whom are punching well above their weight. Thank you.